So, Brother Joe, let's give a hand to Brother Joe.
Check, check, 1, 2. There we go. It's been a long time. 4 years, I think, although I'm really not going to preach. I'm just going to share. And let's start in a word of prayer. As I grab the other mic, I don't need that. Father, thank you for this evening, for the time to worship, to have some great food and fellowship with each other. Just thank you for, we know that we're all here for a purpose, and may our hearts be open to what you have to share with us tonight and to speak to each of us. And we give this time to you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Well, just a little bit of background, since I'm not a Bridge to Hope regular by any means. But as John said, I've been in the space of doing what I can to help people as they come out of jail and prison, as they struggle through, find recovery from addictions and housing, getting people off the streets, all that. But how I got there was I grew up in church, Muskegon, born and raised, and grew up in a Baptist church, having said a prayer when I was 5, went to Awana, memorized all the verses and did all the things. But turns out you can do all those things and still not be a Christian for yourself or have the Holy Spirit within you. So when I realized that, when I was 15 going on 16 years old, I went through a crisis, and it was at a camp in the summer of 2000, 26 years ago now, I guess, where God got a hold of my heart and my eyes were opened, and it all of a sudden became very real. And I went back I was starting my junior year of high school. I came back, and I just wanted everyone around me to have the same freedom that I was feeling and experiencing. And it threw people, because they're like, you're not the same person. I'm like, I guess I'm not. I like this version a whole lot better, and the one that God is making me to be, which turns out is a lifelong work. That's not a one-time thing. And so from 16, 17 years old, I've never sought to be a leader, but people have asked me to lead. I guess I would consider myself a reluctant leader, because people keep asking. And so we had a club called First Priority in high school, and towards the end of my junior year, I was leading that. We went from having 12 kids showing up on a Wednesday morning to 100. And soon enough in this, Mona Shore's very public school kind of liberal setting, we were all gathering, some of us every single day, to pray for each other, for our school, our classmates, our teachers. And then we gathered our church every Wednesday, and that was through my junior and senior of high school. I've always liked math and science. I always liked numbers, so it turns out that does translate into fundraising a little bit. But I was going to be an engineer, really mechanically minded. I come from 4 generations of auto mechanics. And so I just figured that's what I would do. And I had some friends who said, well, you're unusually passionate about telling other people about Jesus. And like, maybe you should go to Bible school. And I'm like, I don't really know how that works. I'd never really thought about like pastors and missionaries, like they get paid to do the work, sort of, sometimes. And so I did. 17 years old, I packed up my bags and moved to Chicago, went to Moody Bible Institute, and lived in downtown Chicago for 4 years. Came back, worked at Maranatha Bible Missionary Conference out in Muskegon. I had 4 wonderful summers there. Got married when I was 20. My wife was 21, and finished out there, planted a couple of churches in the Muskegon area, and was asked to join those teams, which I did. And it was really there just because of how we were wired. I oversaw the student ministries, youth group, kids, all the way through like college and young adult. But we always created that space to say like anybody and everybody's welcome, especially if you don't fit somewhere else. And so half of the kids coming to our youth group, their parents didn't go to our church. We had a third kids from public schools, a third from Christian schools, and a third who were homeschooled. And it was just this conglomeration of beauty. But it also meant I had some students who were getting into trouble. And one day I had a mom call me and just in tears and broken and said, my 14-year-old son is facing up to 50 years in prison. And I was like, can I meet you and your husband and let's talk? So I did. So I, not knowing much about how the system worked, I jumped right in. And I started asking other pastors in churches, like, what do you do if you have people in your church going through stuff like this? And many of them said, we don't have people like that. And I was like, well, I do. And then the other common response was, well, we'll refer to, if we can refer to a decent attorney or a counselor, or whether it's a traditional therapist or biblical counselor, and we'll pray. And that's all we can do. And I just for myself felt like there was more I should do, I had to do. So ended up walking with that family for 4 years. In the midst, kind of stepped out and said, all right, if we're gonna figure out how to do this, I wonder who else does it. And at the time, one of the only this was 2012, 2013. One of the only organizations that I knew of at the time was called 70x7 Life Recovery in Holland. And fast forward, I ended up leaving the church with their blessing. They sent me as a local missionary, and we started to build a separate nonprofit around how do we walk with people who are involved in the system. And it took a lot of really beautiful and hard turns. So I did that for almost 10 years. What was my nonprofit called Bridge to Community became 70x7 Life Recovery Muskegon, which became Fresh Coast Alliance. And all through those years, we just said, my main hope and goal was, how do we be, especially for people who have nowhere else to go and nowhere else to turn and no other options, how can we be the hands and feet of Jesus with them? Whatever that looks like, whenever it occurs. And so we did that, and we got into some crazy things like housing. I asked my friends over the years, like, okay, we've got good jobs, we've got good programs, we've got stuff to do during the week, we got all these groups going on and Bible studies, but it's still hard to make it if you don't have a decent place to rest your head at night, safe, affordable, supportive, and a community that you can just live life with. So nobody else really wanted to do the housing thing, so we said, we're going to do it, and we did, and it was nuts, but it was great. And so anyway, we brought certified recovery housing to Muskegon County. I talked with people all over the country because I'm like, there's no reason that we need to like reinvent wheels here. Let's just, if you'll let me borrow your ideas and then tweak them so that they work and fit for Muskegon, that would be great. And I've been blessed to meet some of the most absolute wonderful and great leaders in the space throughout the country. Fast forward, and then I'm going to jump into a passage here because I hope it connects. But, we all go through some hard transitions in life. I don't remember who said it, but one of the worst mistakes we can make, we were talking about leadership, but I think it's more than leadership. It's one of the worst mistakes we can make as people is that we stay too long. It's hard to let go. It's hard to move on. It's hard to forgive others. I think it's harder often to forgive yourself, but to let go and to move on. And when I left Fresh Coast to come here to Reach the Forgotten a little over 3 years ago, I walked away from something I had spent a decade building. And all my heart, my soul, my flesh, my sweat, my tears were I mean, literally, I had my sweat equity into all of our homes. I used my contractor's license to renovate them. We hired our people as part of our get back to work stuff to work on the homes, and we paid them. And so walking away from that felt like giving up one of my children. And I didn't do it very well. It was to the point where I was in the midst of a complete relapse and mental health breakdown. And those months, March, April, May of 2023, thankfully I had friends, I had a board, I had a church who were like, Joe, take some time and heal and rest, because my whole life since I was 16 years old, I had been asked to lead, asked to serve. And I took God at his word seriously of like, if I'm going to serve, I'm going to be all in, to the point where I'm just falling over every day because I left it all out there. I can't take any of it with me, right? But I also didn't know how to take care of myself. And I didn't realize that over a period of years and years and years that my own relationship with Christ had suffered, which is not unusual when you're in leadership for a long period of time. And so my friend Nate DeWard, who is the longtime director here at Reach the Forgotten, he had contacted me about something, and I just said, hey, I want you to know, like, I'm currently on medical leave right now trying to figure my stuff out here. And he said, Joe, I don't know if it makes sense, but we'd love to have somebody like you here at Reach the Forgotten. We're going through some changes and transition here, and I think we've been looking for somebody like you, praying for somebody like you. So, May 31 was my last day in Muskegon, and then June 1 of 2023, I joined the RTF team here. And with the hope of being at Reach the Forgotten for a long time. And as John mentioned, I just went through another transition, but I'm going to save that towards the end because I want to jump into 1 Kings chapter 3. And whether you have your Bible or can read along on, I don't have anything for the screen, so I apologize for that. But I want to read and go through the better part of 1 Kings chapter 3 here. And I had to brush up a little bit on some of the history of King Solomon. As you might know, and something that was drilled into me since my Bible school and Sunday school days, well before that, Solomon was known as the wisest man to ever live. He asked God for that, and he gave it to him. But when you look at the transition from King David to King Solomon, it was a mess. And I'm not going to go back there, but to summarize the first couple chapters of 1 Kings, Solomon's half-brother, Adonijah, there we go. Adonijah tried to take his throne, which kind of made sense at the time because Adonijah was the oldest of the living brothers. Solomon was the younger. But King David had already promised and had decreed and declared that not the eldest or any of the other sons were going to be king. It was going to be Solomon. And Adonijah came in and declared himself king and basically tried to coup and usurp Solomon. And one of the amazing parts is that, well, it didn't work. Solomon's mom, Bathsheba, went to King David and said, hey, this is not right. Is this what you intended? And so David fixed it, declared Solomon king. And King Solomon would have had every right to basically have Adonijah killed. That would have been normal and expected, but he didn't. He spared his life. He showed incredible mercy for his brother. So then fast forward in chapter 2, Instead of outright trying to take over the throne, Adonijah comes up with this plan to marry the caretaker of his father David, and basically quietly try to take over the throne. This time, Solomon was like, nope, we're not doing that. And he made a promise to the Lord God that Adonijah would not be able to continuing to defy God's will, to divide the kingdom and all that. So, yes, Solomon got to be king and the wisest man to ever live, but it was a very rocky, messy road to get there. And he almost didn't from a human perspective. There's so many things that could have gone wrong, but God clearly had his hand on him through the whole process. And so we get to chapter 3, actually the verse right before that ending, Kings chapter 2, it says, and the kingdom was now firmly established in Solomon's hands. And so looking forward, I'm going to read a better part of of chapter 3 here. And it says that Solomon made an alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and married his daughter. He brought her to the city of David until he finished building his palace in the temple of the Lord and the wall around Jerusalem. And the people, however, were still sacrificing at the high places because the temple had not yet been built for the name of the Lord. Solomon showed his love for the Lord by walking according to the statutes of his father David, except that he offered sacrifices and burned incense in the high places because there wasn't the temple yet. And we'll get there. And then the king went to Gibeon to offer sacrifices, for that was the most important high place at the time. And Solomon offered 1,000 burnt offerings on that altar. And at Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon during the night in a dream, and God said, ask for whatever you want me to give you. Solomon answered, you have shown great kindness to your servant, my father David, because he was faithful to you and righteous and upright in heart. You have continued this great kindness to him and have given him a son to sit on his throne to this very day. Now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David. But I am only a little child, and I do not know how to carry out my duties. I think of my 16-year-old self. Your servant is here among the people you have chosen, a great number of people, too numerous to count. So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong, for who is able to govern this great people of yours? So this would have been about, I think, 500-ish years after God brought his people out of Egypt, Moses. So a lot of time has passed, and estimates at that time was that there were around a couple of million Jewish people who came out of Egypt, out of slavery. And so fast forward nearly 500 years, it's likely that the Israelites would have numbered into the many of millions. All of a sudden, this, as Solomon says, I feel like a kid here. I don't know what I'm doing. How in the world am I supposed to, in any effective way, lead or to rule effectively over millions and millions of your people? And then in verse 10, the Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for this. So God said to him, since you have asked for this and not for long life or wealth for yourself, nor have asked for the death of your enemies, but for discernment and administering justice, I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be. Moreover, I will give you what you have not asked for, both riches and honor, so that in your lifetime you will have no equal among kings. And if you walk in my ways and obey my statutes and commands, as David your father did, I will give you long life. And then Solomon awoke, and he realized it had been a dream. He returned to Jerusalem and stood before the ark of the Lord's covenant and sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. And then he gave a feast for all of his court. Can't even imagine being asked for, you can be given anything Ask for anything you could ever want. And he asked for wisdom, specifically for the discernment to administer justice. Notice how God also specifically said, you could have asked for the death of your enemies. Even back when Adonijah was essentially trying to kill him, and he chose to not, he showed mercy that first time. That wasn't what he was about all along, then or now. At the end of the day, justice is in the hands of the judge and the king, not ours. And I don't know why I haven't noticed this before, but it specifically uses the phrase discernment and administering justice. Throughout my life, I've had a lot of ideas of what justice is and what it's not. We all have our own ideas. The world has, and we spend a lot of time debating what it is and what it isn't. I am just so thankful that the root of what justice actually isn't in any one of our fallen hearts, including mine, that it comes from the very heart of our Father. And that is something that we don't have to make up our own definitions. We can go back to knowing that real justice, pure justice, and that we don't have to make it up or figure it out on our own. We can look to our Father. I am very thankful for that. So when John was asking me about this several weeks ago, I don't even know if I knew I was going to be transitioning from Reach the Forgotten yet. This was actually the story I was thinking about, starting in verse 16. So now we get to see this supposed wisdom in action. So starting in verse 16, there's a situation where there were two prostitutes who came to the king, to Solomon, and stood before him. One of them said, "My lord, this woman and I live in the same house. I had a baby while she was there with me, and the third day after my child was born, this woman also had a baby. We were alone. There was no one in the house but the two of us." I find it fascinating because working in the space that I've worked, whether it's prostitution, it's sex work, it's so much abuse happens within that world of addiction, and it's part of it. Out of all the stories, out of all the examples, and if there are millions upon millions of Israelites, why talk about the plight of two prostitutes as the evidence of being a good ruler and judge and king? That never hit me in the way that it did until I was reading this past week. Feels very much like the least of these, to borrow a phrase from the New Testament. But in verse 19, it said, "During the night, this woman's son died because she lay on him. And she got up in the middle of the night and took my son from my side while I, your servant, was asleep. And she put him by her breast and put her dead son by my breast. And the next morning, I got up to nurse my son, and he was dead. But when I looked at him closely in the morning light, I saw that it wasn't the son I had born." The other woman said, "No, the living one is my son, and the dead one is yours." But the first one insisted, "No, the dead one is yours, and the living one is mine." And so they argued before the king. So they couldn't just do a DNA test, having 4 kids of my own and been through all the things. And it's pretty hard to switch kids up nowadays. It does happen, but there's a lot of things in place that we can go through to figure out whose kid belongs to who. Even in the hospital, they give you these security bracelets, and as soon as they're born, they tie you to the parents, and if you try to take the kid, the alarm goes off. Well, this was 3,000 years ago, so a little different. And so not having any of those tools at their disposal, or King Solomon's disposal, in verse 23, the king said, "This one says, my son is alive and your son is dead, while that one says, no, your son is dead and mine is alive." Then the king said, "Bring me a sword." Strange. Okay. So they brought a sword for the king, and he gave them an order: cut the living child in two and give half to one and half to the other. For some reason, that doesn't feel like a great solution. But wait. The woman whose son was alive was filled with compassion, or love, for her son, and said to the king, "Please, my lord, give her the living baby. Don't kill him." But the other said, "Neither I nor you shall have him. Go ahead and cut him in two." So then the king gave his ruling. You can imagine just the heaviness that would have been in the room at that moment. The king said, "Give the living baby to the first woman. Do not kill him. She is his mother." Clearly. And when all Israel heard the verdict the king had given, they held the king in awe, because they saw that he had the wisdom from God to what? To administer justice. As I have more recently made the transition from Reach the Forgotten to Humanity for Prisoners, this story that I hadn't thought about in years, it hit me so hard that sometimes if we really love someone, or we really love something, and God knows our heart is pure, that means we need to let them go. Well, hello to you too. Little dance party here. The woman whose son was alive was filled with compassion. She would rather give him up and see him live, unlike the other woman who really had nothing left to lose at that point. I find that letting go of the people and the things that you genuinely love, that's a different kind of sacrifice. Even as I just begin to glimpse what that is like with my own children as they get older now. You know, yesterday they were babies, and now I've got almost 8-year-old twins, an 11-year-old preteen who is a queen and going on 19, and my son who is 13, and is a sweet kid, but he's also very cool. And he's just now figuring out what life looks like for him aside from mom and dad, and have his own thoughts, and it's good. And but just beginning to realize, like, at the end of the day, and using my kids as an example, they're not mine in the sense that I own them. They belong to the Lord. I'm a steward of them. I'm a special kind of steward because I'm their father, and I'm trying to be just an okay father, actually, and to be the best father that I can be for them. But I don't own them. The Lord does. Fill in the blank with my checkbook, or my home, or my whatever. I don't truly own any of that. I steward it to the best that I can, and sometimes I do it well, and sometimes I don't. Walking through, I wasn't sure, although I've only been gone from RTF a week, so it's literally just cleaned my office out a week ago, down the hall here. And I had a little bit of queasiness coming here. But when I walked through the door, I realized this incredible sense of peace. of, okay, I didn't wait too long and I didn't go too soon, but I left when I should have. And unlike my transition in Muskegon, this one was done, I think, for the most part, out of love. I had done everything I needed to do. I had said everything I felt like I needed to say. I love the ministry and the mission and the people here. But God made it very clear that it was time for me to go. And I didn't even know where I was going to go. So when this woman said, you know what? I'd rather have him live not knowing what kind of life he's going to have, but at least he's going to have a life. And so my friend Doug Chapkus at Humanity for Prisoners, he's going to be 90 years old. Decades ago, he befriended a man named Maurice Carter, who ended up serving nearly 3 decades in the Michigan Department of Corrections for a crime that he very much did not commit. And we have a whole film on that. I was actually thinking maybe sometime we could show it and have some discussion around that. It's an amazing story. So my friend Doug, who's turning 90, has struggled to figure out, as he's founded the organization 25 years ago, and his time on this earth is coming short. He said, Joe, what would you think about coming on with us as that person to help us get to whatever's next? And it just blew my mind, because Doug, humanly speaking, he's one of my heroes. And I was just happy to serve on the board and be a volunteer and kind of just touch a little bit. And within a week, God worked all the details out. But that opportunity for what God was calling to me next wasn't even on my radar. It wasn't even a thing until I had already said, okay, it's time for me to let this go. I don't know where I'm going, but I know where I can't stay. And as I walked that out, literally this week, in the last couple of weeks, I think about, not that it's a perfect example, but when you look at, in this case, you have Solomon, who is king, judge, ruler. I mean, this is literally a courtroom setting where many of us have spent time in different ways. And in this case, I think the woman was able to say, I'm letting control of what happens in the life of my son because I trust the ruler. And I trust that I have a good and wise king. And I was telling John, I'm like, I'm not sure what I'm going to speak about, but I do know that the thing that I have been working through, sometimes painfully, sometimes joyfully here in the last few weeks, so it's fresh, is, do I trust my king? Do I really believe that he has all wisdom? Do I really believe that he is the perfect judge? Do I really believe that he's got this and there is an answer and a solution? I just got to take the next step. And right now that next step is to say I'm willing to let go and to move on. And so I don't know most of you, but I do know that as we journey through life, we all have moments like this. And it isn't just being here tonight, it feels like home for me. And my work in Muskegon, I was able to do this almost every day, having lunch and just doing life with my people. Here it's been more in an office and raising money, managing stuff. Which I can do, but it's not my favorite. But being here today with you And wherever you are in life, and whatever God might be calling you for next, and maybe there's something you need to let go. Maybe it's something you need to hold on to a little longer. I don't know, but I do know that it takes wisdom and discernment to know, God, let me walk with you, not in front of you, not behind you, but with you, and to stick with it as long as you're calling me to, but also to know and to trust you when you say it's time to let go and to move on, to trust you in that too. So that's what I wanted to share. Thank you. Yes. Got this one here. Let me turn this one off so it doesn't.
Thank you first. I just want to thank God bless you. I just wanted to say, yeah, I needed to take off. I have a ministry. My name is Ty Grayell. I have a ministry. Hi, Ty. Thank you. God bless you. And my ministry is called Poems, Spoken Word Ministries, and it's an acronym that stands for Professors of Our Enlightened Messiah Story, Poems, Poems, and so I have a poetry ministry, and I do spoken word. God bless me to be, well, I need to share a couple things first. So at 14 years old, they told me I was ineducable, and I believed it, and I never went to school afterwards. It was a pipeline to prison where I grew up. I got on heroin for 15 straight years of my life, and then on September 25th, 1980, God spoke to me, and that was the last day I did that. So on this September 25th coming up, I'll be celebrating 46 years of sobriety. But I don't want to be long because I just want to speak to what you just about letting go and letting God. It resonated with me so much, the whole story. So I wrote this little short poem. It's called Let Go. It says, as children bring their broken toys with tears for us to mend, I brought my broken dreams to God because God is my friend. But instead of trusting God with faith to work alone, I interfered and tried to help with ways that were my own. At last, I snatched them back and cried, God, how could you be so slow? My child, God said, what could I do? You never did. Let go. And it just moved me to tears. And that analogy, I read that story. I mean, I don't know how many times I read that story, but I never heard it until you just preached it. Because you said you weren't going to preach, but you preached that. And so I just want to share this one last thing. I do have a poetry ministry, and my affinity is for anyone who has been incarcerated, because I come from that population. And so what Poems Spoken Word Ministries is, as the acronym for POEMS is, we are professors of our enlightened Messiah story. As professors of our enlightened Messiah story, we praise, we worship, we give God glory. We unleash the power of the spoken word and increase the faith of all who heard. Evangels upon the hedges and highways, under the almighty shadow, protected always. Disciples of Christ, representing nobly the good news gospel of Jesus globally. Armed with our Bibles and John 1:1, we exhort the life of God's risen Son. We are professors of our enlightened Messiah story. We are poems of God. So I go around to different ministries and try to recruit professors of our enlightened Messiah story. And I teach people how to write poetry and do spoken word. So if you ever, I would love to come and work with your population. And that's what I came to say tonight. God bless you. Thank you, Joe. Yes, sir.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Bathsheba and Solomon.
David, yeah. David,
Called him Solomon.
yeah.
So I'm just wondering if that reflects on what you've been said.
Yeah, so, well, I think that there is a, and I thought about this when I was reading the first couple of chapters, but when you look at the circumstances by which Solomon was born, as literally a product of adultery and murder, not directly, but having David having Uriah killed. That's interesting.
I was just wondering.
Yeah.
Jedediah means beloved of the Lord or friend of God.
Yeah.
We were never told what the dead baby's name was, just that I think it was a boy.
Yeah, they were both boys. That's true. Yeah, we don't know the name.
Of the first one. So
Yeah,
just wondering if that might be why.
that is a great thought. I haven't thought about it like that.
I never thought about circumstances from Solomon's birth. I just, he's a product of, like you said, David. Wow. He did a couple of mean things there.
Mhm.
To get here.
Yeah, it wasn't a great start to life, humanly speaking. But God had his hand on his life. Yep. Well, and we see so much of Solomon as a type of Christ. Not exactly, but we see a lot of the path and the life and the, we see a lot of that throughout Solomon's life too. But all right.
Okay.
So I don't know how we wrap things up here, but
You can hand the microphone to David.
okay.
He's got a reading and then going to lead us into communion.
All right.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
God bless you. Thank you. That's my favorite scripture. Solomon. God asked, what do you want? What do you want me to do? And that's a powerful thing. It's funny because Psalms 121, I lift my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. I lift my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. The pull of earthly concerns weighs me down, Lord. I take on responsibilities that you never meant for me to have, and then complain because I don't have the time to get everything done. I buy things I don't need, and then grumble because taking care of them is too much work for me. I give my attention to whomever is making the most noise, and then feel guilty because I'm neglecting the people who aren't most important to me. Forgive me, Father, for my foolish efforts to find purpose in position, in possessions, and in people. I know that you alone are the source of my strength, the guardian of my ways. Even when I'm too weary to raise my voice and too tired to lift a finger, I again remember what I so often forget, that the direction I'm looking is the way I will go. Help me to keep my eyes focused on you, Jesus, so the enticements and entanglements of this world will lose their power of lure, or will lose their power to lure me away from your heavenly purpose. We get caught up in so many things in life. Things that are going to pass. Things that are passing. Focus here. My help comes from the Lord. Oh, heaven and earth. Heaven and earth. He's helped me a lot through this time. His brothers talked very powerful thing about Solomon. He asked, of all things, what do you need? I need wisdom, Lord, to govern this life that you placed before me. What are you asking the Lord today to do for you in your life? You're asking him to take you higher? Why not be satisfied to where he's got you right now? Let him lead you. Let him guide you.